Hey, you guys. I am here with Dr. Jeff Spencer. We're going to talk about people reaching their true potential.
It's not about athletics. It's not about boardroom or locker room. It's really about us, the person. Full potential is not a destination of arrival. It's a process that's evolved over a person's entire life.
You know the impact that he's made in the world.
Is that there's an energy exchange between people because we do radiate information away from our body.
There are different things, like different almost purposes and versions of us that show up in those different age ranges.
We already have the potentials that are there. They're just dormant and they need to be awakened.
They freak out because they're like, you can't be that human. Like, you can't grow up and be that. You guys, welcome back to the Home-Based Revolution. I am here with Dr. Jeff Spencer. You guys, if you don't know who he is, you do know who he is. You just don't realize. You know the impact that he's made in the world. So he himself is an Olympian, and he has also been coach. He's I think performance coach is not even a good enough term. He pulls out people's, their absolute total potential that they have in themselves. He helps pull it out, and really just brings any barriers down to none. And then lets athletes and lets champions, which are everyday champions, really be exactly who they are without any friction is really like the best way I think I know how to say it. You, Jeff, have worked with, you worked with Bono. Help me with the list. You worked with Bono. You worked with Lance Armstrong. You yourself are an Olympian. Who else have you worked with?
Well, there's Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods, yeah.
I've been on Branson's Island with him, and so I guess the most important way to characterize this is that household names at the top, I've probably had some connection with them. And what I do is non-denominational. You know, we can all be our full potential player in that domain that works best for us. So it's not about athletics. It's not about boardroom or locker room. It's really about us, the person. And do we have a methodology to be able to predictably become a full potential player that we evolve over a lifetime to be able to manifest what our true capacity is? And that's kind of what I do.
You're amazing. So we're in some different groups. Jeff, we've been in the same room at least 3 times at this point. And he's just, you guys, he's just such a delight to be around because he's so calm and he's so focused and he's so, whenever, when you're sitting at a table with somebody and they are fully focused on what you're saying and they're engaged in conversation as opposed to kind of just, I don't know, waiting for their chance to talk or whatever. It's nice to be in your presence, Jeff.
Well, like that's very, very gracious. I care about people, and, the reason why I'm in the game is that as an Olympian, my whole job description for 10 years was to get and keep and evolve my full potential. And I feel like full potential is something that everybody would like to have, but they're not sure how to get it. And it's not just about trying harder or thinking better thoughts. There's a methodology behind that. And because I've experienced what it's like to play at your full potential, I know how to craft that. I want everybody on this planet to experience it, but also start to make it normal. And when that happens, we're happier, we're more productive, we are more generous with our time and our energy. We're more carefree, or more encouraging to other people. It's just almost like an essential daily vitamin that we should have.
Yeah, that's a really good way to say that. Because that's very, very true. Whenever we're living inside of truly what we're designed for with the least amount of friction, we don't have that anxiety and that tightness that then leads to, like short fuses and things like that, that you don't exist in the same place anymore. So we have, of the people that listen, here, there's a lot of there's a lot of moms, there's a lot of families, there's a lot of home-based businesses. But really these days, home-based business is almost every business. The only businesses that aren't home-based are like big corporations. Everything else really is kind of home-based these days. But whenever I love that you're coming on and we're going to talk about people reaching their true potential, because I believe, because I see this, there's a pocket, and it's the biggest pocket of people in home-based business that in some ways mentally believe they're less than because they don't have like the big corporation, or because they don't, if they're not like multimillionaires or something like that. But that's not even what it's all about. So let's talk about what reaching your full potential actually can look like in a day-to-day situation.
Well, first and foremost, full potential is not a destination of arrival. It's a process that's evolved over a person's entire life. And yes, every moment has a full potential innately inherent in it. But we just have to be mindful that a couple of things here is that, number one, you can't rush to develop your full potential because it evolves over time. And it's important that we give consideration to ourselves in terms of the learning curve. That's a really important part of this. The other side of this is that you never really quite arrive to that point where you ever coast. As a matter of fact, anything that's good in life requires energy to maintain it, to be able to move it forward. So those are the things that I would want to say about full potential. And I'd also say that there's only one of us in all of creation. There's never going to be another Jeff. There's never going to be another Martha. And our full potential is unique and distinct for us as a person. It is not a competition with other people. That's why I would rather say that everybody could be a full potential player, and that's how they become their own champion. There's not just a champion where everybody else is second place or third place behind them. We all can become a full potential player to manifest our gifts and our talents. And when we do that, we're able to live a life of passion, for sure. Purpose, we know why we're getting up. We have a reason to get up. We also are productive. We can get stuff done. There's a body of evidence that's being demonstrated about our competency as an individual. We're also gifted to humanity by the things that we're producing. And as a result of that, then we have a certain level of prosperity, but in every area of our life. We have prosperity because we have a rich relationship with our family. We have prosperity because we can appreciate the gifts that we've been given. We live in prosperity because we have friends that we care about. We have mentors. We have benefactors. All of those things kind of carry their own currency in terms of the value that we derive from that. And that's why, again, this is really important to me. I want to say one more thing here is that all of us have our unique contribution to make to humanity that nobody else can make. Yeah. And when we do that, then we've actually really done our job and we've served our purpose, like in this pass through this dimension. And what we get from that is that there's a tranquility of being that comes from knowing that we stepped up and we answered the calling and we stayed in the game to be able to nurture and grow it, to create a body of contribution to humanity that only we could do. And that's kind of our immortality too, because everything that we do touches everybody on this planet in some way, shape, or form that lives on as part of the evolution of the species and the history that's being created. And so, in my opinion, it's really important that we do not discount those things that come easy to us that are our gifts. We don't play the comparison game against what other people are doing versus the value of what we're doing. We look at that distinction. We honor that distinction of only one of us in all of creation. That's really, really, really important to me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. I hope that sunk in as you guys are listening to that, because that is huge. Jeff, you at the last, I believe it was the last event that we were at together, you spoke about the different, and I know you're not going to be able to go into all of it right now, but you talked about the different, basically the different ages that we, as we go through different segments or age ranges in our life, there are different things, like different almost purposes and versions of us that show up in those different age ranges. And it's so universal and so seen across a lot of data that it really is almost like sounds like a scientific model almost of this is, you can expect this in this age range. You can expect this in this age range. And what I took from it was, don't beat yourself up that you were this in this age range, because that's what was designed for you to be like. Can you kind of high level
Sure,
go over a 30-minute talk?
Yeah, I can. So the observation is this, is that when a baby's born, the pediatrician knows for the first 5 years of its life exactly what it's going to do every day. It'll teethe, then it'll start to cry, and then it will roll over on its stomach, then it'll push up, then it'll crawl, then it will stand. They have charted this like for decades, almost centuries. And, babies, they don't go to school to learn all these things. These things just activate at a certain time. So it's like these things are hardwired within us, almost like a time-release vitamin, that at certain points in our evolution and as we age and as we grow, certain things show up that are a bit unanticipated by us because we don't believe that we're going to think anything or way different than we do right now, but we actually have this. And so I realized that, obnoxious teenagers don't go to obnoxious school. They just somehow get obnoxious like overnight. Grumpy old men don't tell you to get off their lawn, until they get to be that age, So the observation is that every decade there is a biological switch that is flipped that changes how we think in a way that we never thought was possible. So, for example, like 0 to 10 years old, that's the decade of exploration where you don't know what you're doing, so you're doing things that could be very injurious to yourself. In the 10 to 20, that's kind of the teenage years. That's where you know everything. And your parents just don't know anything, but I know everything. Don't worry, I can handle everything because I think it, therefore it is. And then in the 20s, it's like altruism. You have these pilgrimage and you have these causes that you champion, and you're going to create the utopia that nobody in all of human history ever did, but you're the one that's going to do it because you guys screwed it up, so stand aside. Then we get to the 30s, man. It's like, I don't know about that altruism thing. That's all about conquest. In the 30s, I want the stuff. I want the cars, I want the homes, I want all the stuff that is a tangible representation of my value as a human being. Yeah. And look, we didn't ask for that. That's just something that shows up. You go to any culture around that age, everybody's doing the same thing within the cultural mores of whatever that culture really is. And there are some challenges with that too, because like in the 30s, you want all the stuff, but once you get it, then your life is consumed by managing all this stuff, and then you kind of lose your creativity and your spontaneity. Yeah. So therefore, in the 40s, that's the decade of order, where you want to prune some stuff out of your life because it's become so intertwined with obligation, you're suffocating, you have no more freedom. So that's what the 40s is all about. Then you get to the 50s, and that's about contribution, where you're still working, you're gainfully employed, you care about what you do, but you also start to care about people. You want to start contributing to their lives by doing some type of support for an organization. Maybe you want to build schools in Mexico or something along those lines. That's very characteristic of the 50s. And the 60s is where it's mentorship. You're getting ready to retire. You've got a lot of water under the bridge. You have credibility in terms of some levels of wisdom, and you want to share that with everybody else to make sure that you can help them avoid preventable problems and have their best life possible. Then you get to the 70s, like me, and this is where you don't care about what anybody thinks because you're finally going to say what you've been wanting to say for the last 20 years because you don't care, So again, what's really important about this, Martha, is that this is a biology. And we've all said, you dummy, why is it that you act like this? You should know better. Well, yeah, but, that's part of what evolution is. These things we didn't ask for. They're hardwired into us. So in my opinion, we need to be mindful of them, but we can't be too judgmental about ourselves for thinking thoughts or wanting to take action on certain things. It doesn't mean that we have to, because I think people are way too hard on themselves in certain circumstances. And the only way that we kind of learn is by avoiding the preventable problems in advance. And if we have knowledge of what these decades are, then we can walk around preventable problems and we can seize like best opportunities. So that's what I found to be true. And if we recognize that that's a biological phenomena, it's not something that we learned or got put into us. It's just part of our hard wiring. Then we could be much more compassionate on ourselves. We can understand people that are behind us that are doing things that seem ridiculous that we did also, and we thought it was true, but then we found out that it wasn't. You know the drill. Like my daughter, Dad, I got this guy. He's the most beautiful man on the planet. He is Mr. Right. And then 2 weeks later, Dad, what was I thinking? You know, that what a mismatch that was. And so the question was, yeah, what were you thinking? So we can kind of see how this sort of works itself out. I found that it's a very valuable tool.
Yeah. It was shocking as you went through it, because I was like, I saw myself, as everybody does, because that's the point, right?
Yeah.
I saw myself in them, and I'm like, shoot, that's it. I kind of love that that's how we're designed too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't love the teenage years.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you're a parent, yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, when I was in them, I was okay with them, but I don't love them with them coming up with mine, right? But I love that in our 20s, in our young adulthood, we have this altruism that is really just so like, I'm going to do this thing. And I love that. And I love for us to be able, I have goosebumps right now. I love for us as parents and as older generations even to be able to nurture that in that group, instead of like poo-pooing it and you just don't know, but like really nurturing it, because it could turn them into, if nurtured, allow them to really turn into that world changer that they're designed to be, because that's a seed of that, that then kind of like, you know, through whatever reasons ends up going into different places.
That's
right?
human nature. I found that for my daughter, I was very well aware of her evolution. You know, we adopted her from Colombia at the age of 10, so it was a very unusual adoption. But, you know, she did not have an exemption from going through what I saw in terms of the decade changes. And, you know, the kind of important thing about that is that we can have compassion for those people that are younger than us because we understand what they're going through, and we can embrace it as a phase. You know, if we can embrace it as a phase, not as a chosen behavior, then the relationship changes in a very significant way. And as I told my daughter when she was going through this, I told her, Ken is her name, K-I-N. I said, Ken, Dad wants to talk to you about something, and I'm going to inform you about a set of circumstances that I want you to be mindful of. And I'm not telling you this to tell you how to live. I'm not condemning anything that you've done. I'm not chewing you out, and I'm not giving you a lecture. I just want you to be aware of something, so when it shows up that we can come back and have a conversation about it. And when I approached it in that way, she always knew that Dad cared. Dad was not trying to suppress or override, but to inform. And she always listened to me with those things that I had to share with her. And then when she came to a place where she was thinking some thoughts that were maybe real in her mind, but really were not going to deliver on the promise that they thought they were, that we would have a basis for conversation.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. I think a lot of parents are, I love what you said, because you said it's not a basis for behavior. It's a phase they're going through. And
absolutely,
I think a lot of parents, they see their kid do something and they freak out because they're like, you can't be that human. Like, you can't grow up and be that like that. But the thing is they're not going to grow up and be that. It's a phase. It's what they're going through right now. It's not what they're going to be. And like, I think it would just help so many parents to understand, don't freak out, breathe. It's fine. This is a phase and breathe with them as they're going through it.
Yeah, they just reflect about how I was. I mean, we were just like them. This is nothing new. I mean, this has been part of human history for I don't know how many millennia, but, again, it's good because it really creates a closeness eventually downstream. And maybe in the late 20s or early 30s, I'll come back and say, thanks, Dad. You're much smarter than I thought you were, because there always is a certain level of appreciation once the white flag goes up and there's some reflection on it. So I love being a dad, one of my favorite all-time things.
Yeah, agreed. I like being a mom too. It's also one of my favorites. So let's go. I want to pop back into the person who's listening right now and their true potential. And what are some, if they're kind of just swimming around maybe they haven't identified their strengths yet. Maybe they don't, what are your very first things that people need to think about?
Well, there are two things actually, because every one of us has a lot of untapped potential within us, but we don't know that. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to notify us that it's there. It's not like you can go and take a blood test and the results come back and show you your untapped potentials. I think I'll have this and I think I'll have that one. It's not like a menu that you could check off like you're ordering sushi or something.
Right.
So the recommendation here is that you put yourself in a state of receivership. And receivership is where you open up your mind, body, heart, and soul to receive insight and experience. Mm-hmm. And that would be like an equivalent of having the curtains of a theater open up the stage. And that receivership, you're inviting insights to show up in your consciousness. And because you can't force things to show up in your consciousness. I mean, we don't really generate our own ideas. Mm-hmm. They kind of show up. And so if we are intentional about slowing our mind down, kind of opening things up, being in deliberate receivership of like, I'm receptive to good ideas and thoughts and potentials just show up in my consciousness, meaning that it occurs to us. And when we're not chasing and looking under every rock, trying to figure things out and pushing too hard, that almost like creates a hypervigilance or a hyper-focus on something where then you kind of miss these things that show up in our consciousness. And what the observation is that when we're in receivership, we're open, we're listening, we're looking for, we're inviting into our consciousness ideas, concepts that are relevant to us, then they show up. And they show up, which has to do with the second part, being in proximity to people, places, and things. Because in my opinion, people don't put potentials into us. We already have the potentials that are there. They're just dormant and they need to be awakened. Mm-hmm. And how they become awakened is when we're in proximity to someone that has that potential. Potentials and states of being have an energy source within them that is projected out away from the body. It's like a radio signal. You've seen radio signals that go from the broadcasting station that then go to the headphones. Well, that's a communication over time that's invisible. Well, every thought we have and every talent that we have is actually doing that. And if what we have inside us is kind of the same frequency, we're on the same wavelength as the person that has already expressed it, then that will awaken in us something that we did not know that was there. So the idea of being around people, places, and things that are different increases the possibility of us being in the presence of someone that could turn on within us an untapped potential that is just waiting to be activated. That's why it's necessary. And sometimes we spend too much time waiting. Well, I'll just wait for it to show up. I'll eat another chocolate cake and I'll binge another Netflix, you know the deal, right? And so we're still waiting. And my deal is, well, if you're waiting, the likelihood of being informed of something within you because you've been in proximity to it and someone else, and you being woken up is like almost like non-existent. So to me, in our schedules, we have to actually schedule time doing things that perhaps we're not familiar with, just to sort of broaden our scope of exposure, to have certain things about us that we don't know that are there brought to our attention that could be transformative to our lives.
I love that. I love that. That goes along with something that I realized probably about 5 years ago. I realized that whenever I really admired somebody, and just, loved what they were doing and how they were showing up and everything, what I realized about 5 years ago was what I admired in them, I admired because it existed in me too.
100%.
And that's that awakening.
Yes.
Of the potential, right? Of the dormant. I love that you touched on that. I haven't ever heard anybody talk about that, but that's so.
It's an energy exchange. You know how some people you meet and you stay up all night talking and you get up after 1 hour of sleep and you're energetic. And other people you get around for like 5 seconds and you lapse into a coma because they're so energy draining, So that's exactly what we're saying, is that there's an energy exchange between people because we do radiate information away from our body that is not verbal, but yet it is still information and energy that is being transferred. So in the presence of that is like us, there's an amplification in the energy exchange. And that's how we can kind of clue into the fact that this is something appropriate that's almost like purposely designed for me. So it's kind of its own alchemy.
Oh, I love that. So a to-do from that, I would say, from the people that are listening right now, a to-do from that would be get out of your house and go do something around people, but then take note of who woke you up that day, who was extra fun to be around, that you had a conversation with. But like you said, Jeff, like you have to get yourself out to even have those conversations.
Correct.
And even if you're in the room, you still have to make yourself you can't just sit in the room and be dormant. You still have to be an active participant then, right?
You got to open yourself up. And that means like getting around things that I'm not familiar with. Yes. Because whatever you're familiar with, you've already gotten all the value you can get out of what you're familiar with. You can't get anything more out of it. There's only so much you can wring out of a wet cloth, and then you can't get anything more out of it. So we actually have to build into our lives uniqueness and distinction in things that we haven't done before. Like I went to a Mensa meeting. I don't know what my IQ is, but I said, I'm going to go to a Mensa meeting. So I went there and these guys were quizzing themselves and playing 10 games of chess with each other. I mean, it was, truly amazing. So by definition, that uniqueness is almost like a requirement that needs to be scheduled. And, it's similar to fear. You kind of need to schedule some fear once in a while too, so that you prove to yourself that you can actually do a lot of the things that you think that you can't. You just need to kind of approach them appropriately, and then things can be awakened within you that you didn't even know that existed.
I love that.